Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our Renewing America's Nonprofits December webinar. We are Sustainable Westchester. Today, we'll be talking about the Renewing America's Nonprofits grant opportunity, and we'll be going through the application. So just to introduce our presenters real quick, my name is Mark Krosky. I am the Deputy Director for Building Decarbonization. I apologize if my voice is a little bit hoarse. I am still recovering from a cold, so we're just going to power right through it. We also have Dara, who will be taking us through the first several slides on our presentation today.
Hi, everyone. As Mark said, my name is Dara. I'm a program coordinator for Renewing America's Nonprofits. I'm part of the Building Decarbonization team, and I'll be helping you guys out in the application process. Okay, first, I just want to go over some housekeeping items. The session will be recorded and posted to our RAN webpage. Your mic and video are disabled for the duration of the webinar, and so that any questions that you have, you can put it in the chat. Any questions that we don't get to today by the end of the webinar will be added to our Q&A document on the webpage, or you can contact us as well through email, and we can answer through it that way. And just to let you know, closed captions are enabled so that a transcript can be accessed through our website along with the video recording. Let me put this on now. And yeah, si tiene alguna pregunta, por favor, hágalas en el chat al final de la sesión. Tenemos un hablante de español en la llamada para ayudar, sería yo. Esta presentación se realizará en inglés, pero tenemos los subtítulos activados y estamos guardando la transcripción en vivo de este seminario web. Podrá consultar la transcripción del seminario web una vez que se haya publicado en nuestro sitio web. Some acknowledgements here. This program is supported by the U.S. Department of Energy State and Community Energy Program, and under the Renew America's Nonprofits Program and 2022 Funding Opportunity Announcement for Energy Improvements and Nonprofits Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And the award number is DESE 0001-003. And just some important links if you guys wanted to check out our RAN webpage if you haven't already. The RAN website link is right there, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code to open it up on the side if you want to check it out if you haven't already. And also, we have on the side here, if you want a copy of the slides to open up while going through these presentations, so you can click on any links. Feel free to scan with your QR code there, or go to bit.ly/RAN web slides. And here I'm going to go through the agenda. First, I'm going to go over an overview of the Renewing America's Nonprofits grant. You'll hear me referring it to as RAN for short. We're going to go through program eligibility, energy studies, what projects can be funded, RAN scoring criteria, technical assistance that we'll be providing, RAN application process and the timeline, and we'll have the Q&A portion at the end. Okay, so an overview of the grant. Just to let you know that there was prime selectees for this Renewing America's Nonprofits grant. The DOE had provided $50 million to 9 prime selectees across the U.S. in order to reduce the carbon emissions, improve health and safety, and lower utility costs of buildings owned and operated by 501c3 nonprofits. So Sustainable Westchester was one of the 9 winning prime selectees, and we have been provided with $5.65 million to implement these energy efficiency projects for nonprofits all throughout New York State. So since we are the prime recipients, we'll be responsible for distributing the funds to the subrecipients, which would be 25 to 32 New York nonprofits. And they'll be awarded the grants of up to $200,000 with a 20% cost share requirement. We'll go more into detail about the 20% cost share requirement further on in the presentation. For the 3-year grant, a brief overview of the timeline. Year 1 is for the application and selection process. A portfolio of the building owners will be submitted to DOE for a go/no-go to move on to the implementation phase. And then year 2 and 3 is all about the project implementation. Okay, and here are just some of the requirements in order to see if you're eligible for this grant. A nonprofit organization must have a 501(c)(3) nonprofit determination letter, or you can provide us with proof that you're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit by showing us a 990 as well. You must have a sam.gov and UEI registration number. And if you don't have it by the time of the application, then you can give it to us before the final selection of nonprofits are selected. And if you don't have it already, it's free to sign up sam.gov, and you can get your UEI registration number usually in 10 to 15 days. And I would get that started as soon as you can if you haven't have one already, because to receive any type of federal funding, you must have a UEI registration number. Another requirement is that you must own the building in New York State. Your nonprofit must own the building and then provide proof of ownership of that building. Another requirement is that you must be able to show proof that you need funding for this grant in order to reduce your energy costs and have better energy efficiency for your building. And the last requirement is that you must not be debarred from accepting and using federal funds. So in order to find out if you're eligible, you can use our application by filling in only what's required, which is in the first 2 pages of the application, which we'll show you in the next slide. Everything is marked with a red asterisk to show that it's required to be filled in, and we'll see if you're eligible. You can submit just the first 2 pages, and then we'll verify whether you're eligible to complete the rest of the application, because the rest of the application is what you'll be scored on. But we'll go over that scoring portion of your application later on.
Thank you, Dara. Our application, the link is available on the website, and it is through JotForm. I have some screen caps here to show you just the eligibility sections, so the required sections that Dara was just talking about. So if you'd like to check your eligibility, please submit the first 2 pages of the application. The first page is just your contact information, your building address, and that kind of thing. And the second page is the documentation we need to verify your eligibility with the DOE. So we'll need your legal organization name, your UEI number from sam.gov, your SAM registration. If you are not familiar with the SAM.gov registration and renewal process, it does need to be renewed every year. It is not a difficult process. We just went through it recently. You just need to verify information about your organization and keep that up to date. You also need to provide proof of 501(c)(3) determination, as Dara mentioned, and ownership documentation for the building as well. All right, so getting into more of the meat of the program, once you have determined your organization's eligibility, the first step is really an energy study. So if you're not familiar with what an energy study is, they're often called energy audits or energy assessments, and they're usually the first step on a building decarbonization or energy efficiency journey. So we like to follow best practices here, which are typically follow the energy study followed by energy efficiency measures and then building electrification measures. So in order to complete the RAN application, we will have to define the scope of work. So we will have to have some way to quantify our expected energy savings and environmental benefits, if it's in terms of kilowatt hours saved or therms or gallons of oil, et cetera, whatever it may be. So our preferred method to do this is the Green Jobs, Green New York Energy Study, which I'll go into more detail on the next few slides. But any other reasonable method will be accepted. So we'll accept any other, ASHRAE audit if it's something like a BETA report, which is covered on some of the DOE websites and DOE materials, which we won't go into today, and any other reasonable method that will allow us to quantify those benefits will be accepted. Okay, so what is the Green Jobs, Green New York Energy Study? So New York nonprofits can get an energy study with either a $100, $250, or $500 cost share, and it's actually depending on the number of full-time equivalent employees for the organization. For most people, most organizations, it is a $100 cost share. And it's through NYSERDA, through the Green Jobs, Green New York program. So any nonprofit buildings that are less than 50,000 square feet are eligible. If your building is over that size limit or you have questions about the program, please email us and we can discuss options. Um, Additionally, Sustainable Westchester is able to provide funding for the energy study cost share on a first come, first served basis. If you would like to receive this assistance, first, please submit your program eligibility documentation through the application as we've discussed in the previous few slides, and then contact us at that email address, building-decarbonization@sustainablewestchester.org, and say that you would like financial assistance with the Green Jobs Green New York Energy Study. And that will allow us to pay for that cost share as well, so you can get that energy study for free if you would like to. So what is actually included in the Green Jobs Green New York Energy Study? Um, a qualified energy auditor will come on site to your building, and they will review your building's envelope and mechanical systems. And that is a process that typically takes a few hours. You will have to be on site to give them access to the facility. Additionally, you will have to provide 12 months of utility bills. They will do a utility bill analysis for you. They will also they will also provide you with a summary of your building's current energy usage and cost, as well as a final report detailing the expected energy savings, environmental benefits, and economics of energy efficiency and building electrification measures, as well as the supporting calculations and assumptions that go behind those results. Um, Additionally, after you receive the report, you will be able to schedule a meeting with the energy auditor and you'll be able to discuss their recommendations and you can answer any question, or they should be able to answer any questions that you may have about the report. So the report is typically about 40 or so pages long. It's got quite a bit of detail. One of the most important things, it'll come with a summary table detailing the energy efficiency measures. That's what EEM stands for over on the left. And the second column is, it'll be either recommended or not recommended based on the auditor's recommendation. And these are just sample numbers. I just, made these up. But it will have energy efficiency measure descriptions. So the auditor might identify, you're losing a lot of heat through your doors. So you might want to potentially install insulated doors and some quantitative effects of that. So if you move forward with that measure, you can expect to save 399 CO2 emission, pounds of CO2 emissions per year with this total annual energy savings and a simple payback period, which is, how quickly that would pay for itself. Um, One note I will say about the Green Jobs Green New York Energy Study is it tends to be fairly conservative in regards to the energy efficiency measures. So, if you get a report and it comes back with a bunch of measures that may have long payback periods, so let's say it predicts 50 years to pay for itself, um, don't be put off by that. For one, uh, this Renewing America's Nonprofit grant really changes the math behind that, because when you have that upfront money to put down, it really helps lower those payback periods. Um, okay, so just to go into a little more detail about the report results, it'll have about 1 page of detail for each of the energy efficiency measures that the auditor has identified. So for instance, this one, EEM1, is building airflow reduction. So they're suggesting maybe, I found these locations that appear to be cracks, or, locations where cold air is getting into your building, and we recommend sealing those up. And it'll go into a little bit more detail about their findings and what they recommend. So in addition to energy efficiency measures, they will also recommend BEs, which are building electrification measures, like installing a heat pump water heater, for instance, for the hot water in the building. Um, so if you have completed a Green Jobs Green New York Energy Study, for our application, we have tried to make this as easy as possible. You'll simply need to upload the report as part of your application and then identify which energy efficiency and building electrification measures you would like to pursue. So for instance, you would just need to list EEM1 and BE4 if you were using this example as what you would like to move forward with the scope of your project for. Um, One important note, they don't need to be the same measures that are recommended by the energy auditor. You can certainly not pursue some that they recommend, or you could pursue ones that they don't recommend, especially if you are pursuing this funding and would like to be more ambitious. Um, if you have not completed a Green Jobs, Green New York Energy Study, you will need to define your project scope in the application, and you'll have to upload supporting documentation for that. So if it's another energy study, a better report, something like that, we have to have some way to quantify that. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about what eligible projects are. Um, So this is not the first thing I'd like to say, this is not a comprehensive list. In general, anything which reduces the energy use of the building, or another way to say it, anything that increases the energy efficiency of the building is something that would be eligible. So some common project types are building envelope or insulation upgrades, something like air sealing, insulation, roof overcladding, window replacements or overlays. We're working with a company, for instance, that does window overlays. They recently won a DOE Innovation Prize. Um, and it's a cheaper alternative to get energy efficient windows than for replacement. HVAC efficiency upgrades or replacements, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So if you're replacing a fossil fuel-based system with an air source or ground source heat pump, or something as simple as duct sealing would be eligible. Smart building controls, energy efficient lighting, energy efficient appliances or equipment, windows and doors retrofit or replacement, roof repair or replacement, or thermal energy storage. So these last two are eligible with a caveat, electrical system upgrades to support building electrification and safety improvements needed prior to building electrification. So that could be something like mold remediation that might be necessary before you can implement energy efficiency projects. And the caveat there is that those projects would not be eligible on their own, but they would need to be part of a larger project that included energy efficiency or building electrification measures. So we could not fund solely an electrical system upgrade. It would have to be for the purpose of a heat pump installation, for instance. And again, not limited to what is listed here. If you have a project that is one that is not listed here, but you believe it qualifies, please contact us and discuss with us. Okay, ineligible projects, anything involving alternative transportation, so bike racks or EV chargers, any renewable energy, so solar panels, wind turbines, or electric batteries, water conservation measures, recycling or waste reduction, or installation of new fossil fuel HVAC systems. So if you're replacing an oil boiler, for instance, with a efficient gas furnace, that would not be eligible. And to be clear, these are all great projects, and these are all things that we support. It's just that um, we cannot fund those projects through that grant. And they can be part of an overall larger project, which this grant is funding. But this grant can't fund that portion of the project, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how the RAN applications are scored. So the first thing I want to make clear is that we have created a selection committee with representatives from nonprofits, businesses, community engagement, workforce development, engineering, and sustainability fields. Um, the committee is responsible for scoring the applications, not Sustainable Westchester. So the committee has set the selection criteria and will review the applications, and they will be selecting the 25 to 32 nonprofits to receive assistance. Sustainable Westchester will only be scoring a small part of the application, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Um, Potential applicants can refer to our scorecard to see what key elements should be included in their application. So we're going to go through that in detail in the next few slides, but we have a scorecard linked here and on our website, and it gives some examples of how to earn high scores on those particular items. A couple key notes here. Applications for buildings that are located in a federally designated disadvantaged community or for organizations primarily serving members of a disadvantaged community, and I'll talk about that in a little more in a minute, will be more competitive, but all are encouraged to apply. And I'll go through the mapping tool on the next slide. The second important point is that the project selected will have the goal of maximizing benefits to the community and to the local clean energy workforce. So applications which include a plan to utilize the state's minority and women-owned business vendor list, as well as prioritize diversity hiring and union labor, will be scored more highly. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the disadvantaged community mapping tool. So I have a link to the mapping tool here. It is available on the federal government website. It's very easy to use. If you click on that link, all you need to do is enter your building address in the address bar in the top left. And the tool will tell you if your building is located in a disadvantaged community. Right here, I have an example with our headquarters, it's Sustainable Westchester address. And you can see the census tract outlined in blue here. And you can see over on the right, it says identified as disadvantaged. No. So we are not located in a disadvantaged community. If it is located in a disadvantaged community, this will say yes, and this will be highlighted blue. So you'll be able to see that easily. So the other thing, so when we're scoring these applications, we will separate them into two pools. First are nonprofits that are located in or primarily serve a disadvantaged community, and those that are not. So we'll take the 15 highest scoring applications from the first pool before we merge them all into the same pool and select the remainder of the finalists from that pool. So the other thing I didn't mention is that second point, which is or primarily serve a disadvantaged community. So if the building is located in a disadvantaged community, you would automatically be put in that first pool. The other way is if your organization primarily serves a disadvantaged community, and you can get a little bit creative with that. One example maybe that I can think of is if you have, let's say, a hospital building that is located outside of a disadvantaged community, but you have some data to show that your patients are primarily come from either live in disadvantaged communities or are from lower income, have lower incomes, and you have some data that you can prove that. That's another way to get into that first category. Okay, how are RAN applications scored?
Okay. So as Mark said, I'll be going over the specific categories for the RAN application. So one of the first categories are the quantitative factors and use of available resources, which is the portion that Sustainable Westchester will be scoring for based on your energy study and the scope of work that you'll be doing. So as you can see there, the first 5 points is if you've completed an energy study. As Mark said previously, we recommend for you to get it through the Green Jobs, Green New York energy audit because we have it from a reduced price. And also it's just if you haven't gotten one already, we encourage to use that resource there. One of the other aspects that will be scored for 10 points is the energy use intensity. So the energy use intensity reduction is worth more points because it is a normalized value, so small buildings can be still competitive. So the EUI is divided by the square footage of the building, and so that makes it more competitive, still competitive for everyone else. Then there's going to be 5 points for the total energy use reduction and 5 points also for the total amount of greenhouse gas emission reduction. Maxing this category for 25 points total that you can possibly score here. Okay, and the next category is going to be the community engagement and local hiring commitments, which is worth for 25% of your application possibly. This section will be scored by the selection committee based on the information you have entered in the application, and there is no prescriptive path. We're only looking for you to answer the question, how will this project benefit the local community and local clean energy workforce? So one of the subcategories is the local community benefit. That's worth 5 points. Asking, is there a reduction in air pollution from this proposed upgrade? And then for the community engagement aspect, also worth 5 points, is what is your plan to make stakeholders aware of this project and its benefits? For the next 10 points, it's going to be on your local hiring plans. What is the benefits for the local employment in your area? And the next category for 5 points is for the labor union preference. If you're going to be utilizing labor unions and if they're going to be using prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements required by the Davis-Bacon Act. And we'll be going more into details about that later on in the presentation, how you will be able to implement those aspects into your application. The next category is the community needs and DEIA goals. That is worth for a max total of 20% of your application. So this also will be scored by the selection committee based on what you enter in the application. And the first subcategory worth for 10 points is the presence and scope of environmental justice issues in the community. Or what are the environmental justice issues in the nonprofit or the project serving populations especially vulnerable to climate-related extreme weather conditions. So if you're wondering what are examples of that, we have a document linked in the page here. You'll be able to access them when you have access to the slides. It is provided by the New York State Climate Justice Working Group. And on pages 58 to 76, has a list of indicators considered to represent environmental burdens and climate change risks. And there you can see some examples. The next scored section is for 5 points, which is your application includes a plan to utilize minority woman-owned business enterprises, like our vendors that are minority/woman-owned businesses. And the next 5 points is if your application includes a plan to benefit underrepresented workers. And we'll be going over more how you can implement this in our next webinar about the resources that we'll provide you.
And the last category is miscellaneous items for 30% of the scorecard. Like many federal programs, there are multiple goals for this program, not just the energy efficiency of the building. One of the goals is the ability to serve as a model for other nonprofits. So we're trying to accelerate the energy transition, as well as get better uptake of energy efficiency projects for nonprofits in New York State. So being able to demonstrate successful projects as case studies is also a benefit. Project readiness is worth 10 points. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need, a fully designed project already with contractor bids in hand. Something as simple as having a letter of support from your board of directors to move forward with a project is a huge benefit for that category. Innovative project designs and use of financing. We'll talk about this a little more in the next few slides, but we are looking for, we're hoping to fund ambitious projects that really make use of a lot of different sources of incentives and financing. Grant stacking and incentive stacking is not only allowed for this grant, but it is encouraged. So, something for that category, like utilizing the direct pay incentives that are now available through the Inflation Reduction Act investment tax credit is something that would add points for that category. And the need for program support, as well as the importance and impact of the organization's mission and activities, will be graded by subjectively graded by the selection committee. Okay, so what technical assistance will Sustainable Westchester be providing for applicants? If you need help with your Green Jobs, Green New York Energy study, if you need help getting that study, or if you need help with interpreting the results, and guidance in choosing what project is best for your building and for your nonprofit, we can assist with that. We will also be providing case studies of successful energy efficiency projects to hopefully inspire you. We'll be hosting our weekly office hours to start answering questions and providing personalized assistance for anyone that needs it. We'll be providing a list of vetted vendors, labor organizations, community-based services, general local hiring, union contractors, and job training programs in your area. We'll be providing a list of funding opportunities. So that's a huge category: tax credit opportunities, grants, financial assistance, etc. In our next webinar. Ideas for engaging the local community in your proposed project and site visits as requested. As you go through this application process, please think of us as a resource and how we can help you craft the best application and the project that best helps your organization.
Okay, I'll be going over the grant application process and timeline. So we're going to be providing informational webinars, one of them being today, and the next one is February 6th, 2025. So after today, we're going to be scheduling weekly office hours, and the schedule will be released next week. We're going to be offering personalized application assistance with getting and understanding an energy study, and as well, we will be providing you with a list of vetted vendors and financial resources to be posted. That will also be posted on the website before the next webinar on February 6th. So on top of that, we'll also be providing you with case studies and other technical information, and the final applications will be accepted on May 1st, 2025. And after that, the finalists will be selected and submitted to DOE on June 2025. Okay, so here is some technical assistance that Sustainable Westchester will provide for selected subrecipients. So we're going to be providing training on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals and activities and federal compliance to be implemented in your final scope of work. So along with the documents that we'll be providing you, we'll also have a training on that. We're going to connect you with solution providers and hopefully have you guys organize into collaborative cohorts based on your project types and geography. Hopefully everyone can collaborate and see if there's any similarities in each other's projects and help each other with finding vendors and collaborate on certain aspects of that project. We're also going to have quarterly virtual gatherings. We're going to assist with procurement and project management. And we're going to meet with each nonprofit and the consultants to collaboratively complete the necessary documents. We're going to establish timetables and get community feedback, because we know that there not be too much experience with each nonprofit when it comes to these things. So we're here to be as much of assistance to you as possible for this process once you're selected.
Okay, I want to go through a couple federal requirements just because this is a federal award. So people who have received that before may be familiar with some of those requirements, but it's not important so much for the application process, but I want to get this information up front so people are aware of it. The first is that with our award comes special terms and conditions from the DOE, and we are required to flow those down to our subrecipients. So it's not anything, earth-shattering. It's mostly all standard type language, but we will be asking you, if you're selected as a subrecipient, to sign a memorandum of understanding, which includes those terms, and we can go over that more in detail when it comes to that point. As well as that, we have to meet the federal requirements for the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act if you're potentially a historic building that's considering these upgrades. So we'll get more into detail on that later on. As well as because this is federal award, there are Davis-Bacon Act requirements. So all of our contractors have to comply with prevailing wage regulations, and we will have to use the DOE required electronic payroll compliance system. And we will be available to provide assistance with that when it comes to that time. But I mentioned that up front because if you are considering getting contractor quotes at this point, just make sure that they are including, prevailing wage as part of it, because that will be a requirement. So just very briefly, we're going to talk about financing and funding and et cetera in the next webinar in more detail. But I just want to give, a quick overview and a quick example of what that could look like. We really are encouraging projects that are ambitious and that make use of the different incentives and rebates, et cetera, that are available. with obviously the goal being that we do not want to burden any nonprofits with higher costs. The goal is to have a net positive effect on your cash flow, so that you have more money that you're not spending on energy costs that you are able to reinvest into your mission. Um, so here's an example of just using round numbers. If you had a building with a potentially a $1 million geothermal project, you could make use of the Inflation Reduction Act investment tax credit direct pay benefit, which is a 30% base rate. And then you could have potentially another 10% bonus for the domestic content production bonus, as well as a 10% bonus if it's located in an energy community, if your building is located in an energy community, for potentially $500,000 from that one resource loan. And then when you add NYSERDA funding or utility clean heat incentives, as well as this grant on top of it, suddenly you're left with a much smaller piece that could potentially be financed through, greenhouse gas reduction funding, financing, or some other low-cost financing option. And we'll get into more details later. But I also wanted to mention very briefly, there is a 20% cost share requirement for this grant. So what that means is that 20% of the funding for the project has to come from non-federal sources. It does not necessarily have to be cash from your organization, though it could be. If you had somehow devised a project that had, had funding from this grant and also from NYSERDA, such that you had 20% from other sources that are state or local, but you were paying nothing, then that would be that would meet those requirements as well. So just very briefly, just to get into the payment disbursement schedule, we are not providing the entirety of the $200,000 upfront. When these Once we select our finalists, subrecipients, by month 14, which is September 2025, we'll be providing the initial disbursement, so the first 25% payment before the projects have started. Then once we get all the contractor bids and we're ready to start work, is when we'll issue the next 50% of the funding. In the midpoint of the project, there's another 15% disbursement, and then the final 10% is at the end of the project, once the final reports are completed.
Okay, so I'll be going over what we're going to be covering in webinar number 2. So our second webinar on February 6, 2025, we will cover case studies and best project practices for your projects. We're going to be going through vendor selection and the minority/woman-owned business enterprises utilization into your project by providing you with the vetted vendor list. We're also going to be going over more in detail about project financing, possible options for funding like rebates, incentives, energy efficiency loans, and more. We're also going to be talking about connecting you with local workforce development organizations, and we'll be discussing special terms and conditions on the MOU. So if you haven't registered for it already, please look on our website and register for the February 6th, 2025 webinar.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us. I see there are a number of questions. I'll be stopping the recording, and then we'll be doing a question and answer session. If I did not get to your question, please submit it to us via email. We'll also be adding the commonly asked questions to our Q&A document, so please keep an eye on that on our website. And thank you, everybody.